November 1938, Halifax, England. A man with shiny buckles on his shoes is slashing women in the fog. Another attack happens. Then another.
Within days, an entire English town shuts down completely. Schools lock their doors, businesses close, mobs hunt strangers in dark streets.
One innocent man nearly gets beaten to death by 200 people screaming for his blood. Scotland Yard rushes in.
Over 100 officers deployed, thousands of interviews conducted. They're hunting a serial killer who vanished into the mist like a ghost, the biggest manhunt in decades.
Then the confession comes.
There is no killer.
Right.
There never was. The victims cut themselves, every single one of them.
A 46-year-old mill worker dies because coworkers suspected him. He becomes the only person who actually died.
The attacker killed nobody. The fear killed him.
How does an entire community lose its mind in 14 days? What really happened in Halifax?
Welcome to Whispers of Crime podcast show.
Our objective here isn't just to go over a sensational crime spree. It's more of a forensic examination into how quickly civil society can just break down.
We're investigating collective delusion, really, and institutional failure, and the devastating human cost when terror just completely replaces fact.
Follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime.
So to really get what happened in Halifax, I mean, how it all happened so incredibly fast in November 1938, you have to understand the psychological state of Britain at that exact moment.
Right. This wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. It was the result of a profound national stress. The whole country was on a knife's edge.
And we were talking about 2 months after the Munich crisis, correct?
Right.
That September deal where Chamberlain came back waving a piece of paper.
That's the critical context. Waving that paper, promising peace in our time.
A promise that felt hollow, I imagine.
It was profoundly fragile. I mean, nobody really believed it. The nation was suspended in what they started calling the War of Nerves.
So avoiding the war didn't bring calm. It just brought a different kind of anxiety.
Exactly. The question wasn't if war would begin, but when and what it would cost. People were expecting air raids any day. They were literally digging trenches in parks, fitting their children for gas masks.
The threat was invisible, existential, this constant, abstract fear of fascism, of invasion.
And that abstract, overwhelming threat created this perfect psychological pressure cooker.
And Halifax itself had its own specific fears layered on top of that.
It did. Halifax was a working-class industrial town, a textile town, so it was deeply reliant on international trade. The fear of German bombs was matched by this very real, very immediate fear of economic collapse.
Of unemployment, starvation.
If those trade routes were cut, yes. So when the Slasher appeared, he offered the town something its government couldn't.
A concrete enemy.
Precisely.
Yeah.
A tangible enemy. You can't fight Hitler or, global trade instability with a flashlight and a neighborhood patrol.
But you could hunt a man in a Macintosh on your own streets.
And that's what happened. The Slasher became this convenient target, a place for the community to displace all its deeper, unmanageable fears.
So let's get into the timeline. How did this phantom first emerge from the fog?
The official timeline begins on November 16th, 1938. This was the Rupondon Bank incident. Two women, Mary Gledhill and Gertrude Watts, both 21, were walking.
And they reported an assailant attacked them.
Yes, with what they described as a mallet.
And the description they gave was instantly memorable. It became part of the folklore of this thing almost immediately.
It was almost theatrical.
Oh.
The man had conspicuously bright buckles on his shoes, a large mouth, and, this is the most disturbing part, he vanished into the fog with supernatural speed.
Supernatural speed. So right from the start, he's not just a man. He's a monster, a ghost.
He's a mythical character, this terrifying shadow.
But that initial report, it didn't immediately send the town into a complete frenzy, did it?
No, not right away. There were 5 days of relative quiet after that. And, historians still debate whether Gledhill and Watts' account was genuine. But regardless of its truth, the real ignition point for the mass panic came 5 days later, November 21st.
This is Mary Sutcliffe.
This is Mary Sutcliffe, a 21-year-old factory worker. She reported being attacked on Lister Lane.
On her way home from the Macintosh's sweet factory. I mean, a very mundane, everyday setting for something so violent.
And that's what made the threat feel so universal, so real. And Sutcliffe had a genuine injury, a deep cut on her wrist.
Serious enough for stitches.
4 stitches. It kept her out of work for 2 weeks. And this is crucial. The police officially classified her incident as the first attack, This sort of sidelined that earlier report from Gledhill and Watts.
So her physical wound happening right in town, that confirmed the reality of the slasher for everyone.
For the authorities and for the public, yes. And then the media stepped in.
And that's the moment it stopped being just a police matter.
Absolutely. The local paper, the Halifax Courier and Guardian, they immediately offered a £10 reward for his capture.
So now there's money involved. It's a high-stakes emergency.
It was that institutional response, not just the police taking notes, but the media throwing money at it. That was the critical tipping point.
So if Sutcliffe's report and that reward were the catalysts, how much did the town's own history play into this, the fact that they'd seen something like this before?
The historical memory was the bedrock. I mean, it was the pre-existing foundation for the entire delusion. It only took 5 days from Sutcliffe's attack for this to spiral completely out of control.
And that speed was only possible because they already had a template for this kind of horror.
You're talking about the 1927 case.
Exactly.
Yes. Just 11 years earlier, Halifax had a genuine slasher, a man named James Leonard. He'd stalked 6 women, slashed their clothing, got 6 months for it.
And he had a very distinctive feature.
A very prominent nose. Which is interesting because the police quickly ruled him out of the 1938 case because none of the new victims mentioned that nose.
So the community already had this concept of a slasher embedded in their subconscious. It made the news stories instantly credible.
It created a powerful cognitive template. People didn't need to invent a new terror from scratch. They just projected their current anxieties onto this familiar existing structure.
It was psychological scaffolding.
That's a great way to put it. It allowed the fear to spread like wildfire. The stage was absolutely set for institutional failure.
And that failure came quickly.
The shift from localized fear to full-blown mass hysteria was critically accelerated by the very authorities who were meant to keep order.
When did it really start to intensify?
November 24th, 3 days after Sutcliffe's attack, the incident with Clayton Aspinall.
The caretaker at the Methodist church.
That's right. He reported cuts to his head and hands outside St. Andrew's Church. And it's important to note, Aspinall never recanted his story. His case is one of the few that some historians think might have been genuine.
But it was the police response to his report that really threw gasoline on the fire.
It was an immediate and frankly catastrophic failure of risk assessment.
What did they do?
They publicly performed panic. Over 200 schoolgirls from the Halifax School of Art were not just warned, they were physically locked inside their classrooms for safety. And that extraordinary measure, it was this clear, visible signal from the authorities that the threat wasn't just real, but it was completely out of control. It was roaming the streets.
It was a theatrical performance of danger.
That's exactly what it was. It confirmed everyone's most extreme fears. And then they organized male students and volunteers to escort the girls home.
Which just formalizes the idea that normal life is now too dangerous, that Halifax is under siege.
And meanwhile, the national press is just feeding this frenzy.
What were the headlines like?
They were relentless. The Daily Mirror especially. Screaming headlines, maniac escaped, things like that. And they were often citing police sources.
So the police were contributing. They were co-writing the myth.
They were holding press conferences, giving these sensational descriptions of a phantom. It was a feedback loop. And then they signaled their own panic by first upping the reward.
From £10 to 25?
A huge jump. It screamed desperation. But the key move was calling in Scotland Yard.
That nationalizes it. It's not a local problem anymore.
It instantly transforms it into a matter of national security. The police were effectively announcing, this is an emergency that is beyond our local capability.
And when institutional authority validates the fear but loses control of the response, the community steps in.
And this was the second catastrophic failure by the police. They outsourced law enforcement.
What do you mean by that?
In a desperate move to look proactive, they deputized 80 ordinary citizens, untrained civilians, to join the search.
So they gave official permission for untrained people to start hunting suspects.
It was a disastrous vacuum of authority and accountability. These men had no training, no restraint, and they were operating in a climate of pure terror.
They didn't just outsource law enforcement, they sanctioned vigilantism.
They did. And it gets worse. They set up this quasi-official surveillance network with Rover Scouts and Boy Scouts children manning phone kiosks to report suspicious activity.
Giving children authority over adults during a period of extreme social stress?
It's unbelievable. And when you mix that mass-validated fear with officially sanctioned mob patrols, Violence against innocent people becomes inevitable.
And the violence was immediate. We need to talk about Clifford Edwards. He was a true victim of this panic.
Plus,
On the night of November 25th, Clifford Edwards, just an ordinary local man, he was out trying to help.
he was patrolling the streets, assisting in the search after a new attack was reported by a woman named Hilda Lodge, and he was tragically mistaken for the slasher.
That moment of mistaken identity, it transformed him from a helper into the town's scapegoat.
Instantly, a mob of about 200 people surrounded him, witnesses at the time. They recalled the crowd chanting these horrifying explicit threats.
What were they yelling?
Things like, "They've got him, kill the bastard, break his bloody neck." This wasn't just anger, this was attempted summary execution on the street.
My God.
He was seconds away from being murdered by his own neighbors. It was only the rapid intervention of police officers who had to physically fight their way in and extract him that saved his life.
That incident alone is just the clearest evidence of how completely civil order had collapsed.
Utterly. And the violence didn't stop there.
No. 2 days later, a teenager was attacked.
15-year-old Fred Baldwin. On November 27th, he was just pushing his bike home. A group of drunken men vigilantes on patrol, they set upon him.
And the attack on a 15-year-old boy, it shows you just how broad the definition of a suspicious person had become.
Anyone could be the target. But Fred Baldwin's father, Raymond, he sought justice. He actually sued one of the assailants, a man named William Spencer.
And the outcome of that lawsuit, it reveals everything about how the authorities viewed the difference between lying and violence.
It's shocking. William Spencer, the man who took part in assaulting a child, he was given a mere 10-shilling fine.
A slap on the wrist?
It's not even that. And it stands in this stark criminal contrast to how the self-harmers would be treated later. The message was clear. Staging an injury to get attention was a serious crime deserving of prison.
But participating in mob violence against an innocent citizen,
that warranted almost nothing. The vigilantes were effectively protected by the very climate of panic the authorities had helped create.
the hysteria reached its absolute peak on November 28th, didn't it?
It did. On that single day, 3 entirely separate attacks were reported. According to Scotland Yard's later analysis, that was a logistical impossibility for a single perpetrator.
But when the facts become impossible, the belief system just adapts. It must be multiple slashers.
Precisely. The reports were so specific. Constance Maywood, a weaver. Then Margaret Kenny, who said she fought back, gave this detailed description of a well-built man in a dirty Macintosh.
The sheer volume, the theatricality of it all, it couldn't sustain itself. It was about to implode.
And the trigger for that implosion came from the person who started the official panic in the first place.
Mary Sutcliffe.
It was. On the evening of November 29th, Sutcliffe reported a second attack, a slash to her chest. This one, she said, happened in her own backyard, just 5 yards from her front door.
5 yards from her front door? That sounds almost too convenient.
It was too quick, too close. Her mother had just walked her to the door and turned away for a moment. Police were on high alert. They arrived within 5 minutes.
Yeah, no one saw anything.
No one. Not neighbors, not her family. No one saw an attacker flee. This second impossible report, it just strained credibility beyond its breaking point. It was the first real crack in the foundation of the whole slasher narrative.
And that crack let the first real admission through.
That same evening, November 29th, the whole investigation just detonated.
Right.
Percy Waddington, a 38-year-old manager at a local co-op store, he confessed.
What did he admit to?
He told police he had inflicted his own 2.5-inch hand injury. And critically, he admitted he deliberately ripped his own raincoat.
The raincoat that police had been treating as crucial physical evidence.
The proof of the slasher's existence. So his confession didn't just reveal a hoax. It invalidated the physical proof the entire manhunt was built on.
The police realized they'd been chasing a ghost.
The ghost created by a lie. Waddington's admission was the detonation point. It broke the dam.
And how quickly did the other confessions follow?
It was instantaneous. It was a chain reaction. Within hours, a cascade of confessions started pouring in. It was like the permission to admit the hoax had finally been granted.
Let's go through them, because they really reveal the heart of this whole psychological tragedy.
First was Hilda Lodge, the woman whose report almost got Clifford Edwards lynched. She admitted she had scratched her own arms and face with glass from vinegar bottles she'd smashed on purpose.
So she used the public panic to explain her own self-harm.
Then there was Beatrice Sorrell. She was only 18. She confessed she'd bought a razor blade specifically to stage an attack.
And her motivation?
Tragically simple. She wanted to get the attention of her complacent boyfriend. She needed this huge external crisis to validate her own need for care.
And Lily Woodhead's story is heartbreakingly similar.
Lily Woodhead, 21. She confessed her boyfriend had just broken up with her, refused to walk her to the bus stop. She had prepared a razor blade in advance, hoping that an injury from the slasher would make him regret leaving and come back to her.
So the slasher narrative became this ready-made script, a socially acceptable way for these young women to express deep emotional pain.
It was. They were performing their grief. Instead of the private pain of abandonment, they converted it into this visible, public, theatrical woundedness.
A cry for help in the only language the town could understand at that moment.
It was. And the list went on. Leslie Nichols, a 21-year-old baker, Winifred McCall, 17. They both confessed. By November 30th, just 2 weeks after the first incident, Scotland Yard formally concluded its investigation. The Halifax Slasher did not exist.
This clearly wasn't just a case of malicious lying. It was something much deeper, a community-wide psychological phenomenon. What was going on there psychologically?
There were several layers. Relationship dysfunction was obviously a primary factor for the young women. The slasher story gave them a stage.
But there's also speculation about something called conversion disorder.
There is, and it's an important distinction. Some psychologists suggest that not all of these injuries were consciously fabricated. Conversion disorder is a condition where severe psychological distress manifests as genuine physical symptoms, but without conscious control.
So it's possible some of them genuinely felt pain, and their subconscious, soaked in the slasher hysteria, just supplied the attacker as the cause.
It's entirely possible. For them, a confession might have been a reframing of a real physical event, not admitting to a calculated lie. It changes the narrative from criminality to profound vulnerability.
And you can't overstate the power of suggestion in all this.
No. The institutional reinforcement, the rewards, the police actions, the media warnings, it primed everyone. An anxious person could easily interpret a minor scratch from a bush as an attack.
The perfect storm. National anxiety, a historical template, institutional validation of fear, and individual psychological distress, all converging.
The speed of the confession cascade just confirms how fragile that collective psychological dam had become. It was held together by fear, and as soon as one person debunked it, the whole thing just collapsed.
Now that the hysteria is over, we need to turn to the true cost, the hidden casualties that the authorities seem so eager to forget.
Don't forget to follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime. Like, share this episode with others who might have information about this case, and help. Also, comment your suggestions below. Drop your positive review and rating. Remember to check out our recent released UK historical cold case like this.
The swift end to the slasher case let the authorities save face, but it meant burying the true human wreckage caused by the panic.
The greatest casualty of the entire Halifax Slasher episode was a man whom history has largely forgotten. The only person to actually die was killed, not by blade, but by collective suspicion. We have to honor the story of Michael McKeevan.
Michael McKeevan, a 46-year-old mill worker. What made him the focus of such lethal suspicion?
McKeevan was already struggling with his mental health. He was described as isolated, maybe a bit eccentric, by his coworkers. When the slasher panic took hold, those characteristics, just being different, made him a prime target.
He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, with the wrong personality for a town on a witch hunt.
And his proximity to some of the reported attack sites that combined with the town's desperate need to put a face to their fear. His coworkers began to actively suspect him.
He bore the full weight of the town's displaced terror.
He did. He became the target of this intense social ostracism, relentless accusations, and he couldn't cope. The crushing weight of it, the destruction of his reputation. Michael McKeevan took an overdose of aspirin and died. His death happened right in the middle of the hysteria, but it was deliberately obscured. He was the only person who physically died during this entire mass delusion.
The only fatality. His reputation was destroyed, and the mob stole his peace. Why did the local press and the authorities go to such extraordinary lengths to hide his death? What does that say about accountability?
They buried it. The local press reported his death as just an unrelated suicide. They minimized any connection to the slasher panic, the inquest, the official records. They never recognized him as a direct casualty.
It was damage control.
Pure damage control.
Yeah.
Acknowledging McKeevan's death would mean accepting that the official response, the deputization, the sensationalism, the validation of fear, directly led to the death of an innocent man. It was institutionally simpler to silence his story and just prosecute the hoaxers.
And that selective focus continued into the legal aftermath. The punishments were incredibly unequal.
Highly selective, yes, and focused on repairing institutional pride. The authorities were determined to punish the self-harmers severely to show how serious the hoax was and, minimize their own embarrassment for being so easily fooled.
So the young women who confessed, they were imprisoned.
Yes. Beatrice Sorrell, Hilda Lodge, Leslie Nichols, Winifred McCall, all convicted of causing a public menace. They were sentenced to 4 weeks in prison.
And Percy Waddington, the man whose confession broke the case open.
Waddington, the store manager, was made a severe example of. He was bound over for 3 years and, critically, stripped of his job. For a 38-year-old man in the 1930s, that was a career-ending punishment, far more devastating in many ways than a month in jail.
And then you contrast that severity with the outrageous leniency shown to the actual violent vigilantes.
The contrast is horrifying. William Spencer, the man who assaulted 15-year-old Fred Baldwin, got a 10-shilling fine.
That's it.
That's it. It's the clearest illustration of the institutional priority. Prosecute those who embarrass the police while minimizing the actions of those who committed violence in the spirit of the police's own sanctioned manhunt.
Even a legal acquittal offered no protection from the mob.
None. A woman named Annie Cannon was accused, but she was acquitted in court. It meant nothing to the community. A mob, still fueled by all this anxiety, went and smashed the windows of her house in retribution.
Suspicion trumped justice.
Completely. The community had already passed its verdict.
So if the official report buried McKeevan's death and downplayed the vigilante violence, what other dark details were suppressed?
The entire dimension of gendered violence was erased. Local historical accounts suggest that at least one female victim reported being sexually assaulted during the panic, but she refused to file a formal report.
Because of the social shame in the 1930s.
The intense shame, the attitudes of the time. The police were more than happy to reduce all the incidents to just slashing. It removed the darkest, most difficult details from the public story.
There's also the question of coercion around the confessions themselves.
A huge, unresolved question. The sheer speed of that cascade, the dramatic details. It raises serious questions about what happened in those interrogation rooms. We have no documentation of police pressure or psychological manipulation. Were these admissions freely given out of relief, or were they extracted to close an embarrassing case quickly?
We'll never know.
It's a permanent shadow over the case.
Yep.
And even the conclusion itself was crafted to be ambiguous.
How so?
Scotland Yard's full report was never released to the public. The Halifax Courier published the official, carefully worded end statement. The slasher scare is over. There never was, nor is there likely to be, any real danger.
Is there likely to be? That phrasing leaves the door open just a crack.
Just enough ambiguity to let the anxiety dissipate slowly, without forcing the public to confront the full scope of the institutional failure and the mob violence that had defined the last 2 weeks.
The Halifax Slasher case is this profoundly troubling historical document. It shows that collective delusion isn't a modern phenomenon. It's a default human response to uncertainty.
And it happened without social media, without the 24-hour news cycle. The mechanisms of contagion were just as effective.
The core lesson here seems to be the deadly power of institutional authority to legitimize fear.
Absolutely. The core failure was institutional. When communication is opaque, when fear is validated through these theatrical extreme measures, school lockdowns, escalating rewards, the authorities don't just manage panic, they amplify it.
And the breakdown of civil order was a direct result of that.
That decision to deputize 80 untrained citizens was a direct invitation to mob justice. The attacks on Clifford Edwards and Fred Baldwin were the predictable, physical consequences of a community being taught by its leaders that extreme private action was justified.
And as we've seen, the most marginalized, the most vulnerable people paid the highest price.
Always. Michael McKeevan, isolated and fragile, was destroyed by suspicion his institutions failed to protect him from. Young women in genuine emotional crises were driven to self-harm and then imprisoned, while the institutions responsible for the chaos largely escaped any critical scrutiny.
It feels like a blueprint for future mass hysterias. But Halifax doesn't stand alone in history, does it?
Not at all. You see these patterns again and again. You can go back to the London Monster in 1788, a phantom attacker stalking women. Most of the assaults later found to be self-inflicted or exaggerated.
And there was a similar case in America.
The Mattoon Phantom in Illinois, 1944, eerily similar. A phantom assailant terrorizing a town with alleged gas attacks until it all unraveled as a hoax fueled by intense local anxiety.
These historical echoes, they remind us that this vulnerability is just. It's a constant in the human condition, always waiting to exploit a breakdown in verifiable fact.
The real tragedy of the Halifax Slasher case isn't about finding an attacker who didn't exist. It's about the institutional willingness to prioritize protecting its own reputation over acknowledging the physical, psychological, and ultimately lethal harm done to its own citizens.
Michael McKeeven's death remains the central, ignored tragedy of it all.
A testament to the fact that fear, when it's unchecked and institutionally validated, becomes its own destructive force.
The story is so haunting because the attacker was invisible, but the victims, the man nearly lynched, the boy who was assaulted, the mill worker who was destroyed, they were all very real. It's a reminder that fear, once it's unleashed, becomes a weapon aimed at the heart of its own community.
It's a powerful reason to always exercise critical thinking when you're confronted with information overload and collective fear. Verifiable facts and transparency. They are the only real defense against the kind of hysteria that tore Halifax apart.
Don't forget to follow Whispers of Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and other podcast platforms for daily updates on every crime, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Whispers of Crime. Like, share this episode with others who might have information about this case and help. Also, comment your suggestions below. Drop your positive review and rating. Remember to check out our recent released UK historical cold case like this.